coffee has been valued since the beginning for its stimulant effect, but it is so much more than that.
Welcome, Han and Vaishal. Nice meeting you, and thank you for accepting my interview today. We are going to be talking about your movie Caffeinated. So just before we get started, perhaps if you don't mind just introducing yourselves, it's better than instead of me introducing you, better be you yourself introducing it. So who wants to get started?
Han, you go first.
Okay. Well, my name is Han Nguyen. I am a documentary filmmaker here in Los Angeles. I've been making documentaries for over 10 years. I started, actually I started when I was 17, back in Kansas City, Missouri. I went to college in San Francisco. That's where I really honed in on my skills with telling stories, and particularly documentaries. And then I moved to Los Angeles to kind of further expand those skills.
Beautiful, thank you. And we'll dig deeper a little bit later on. Vaishal?
Yes, so my name is Vishal Solanki. I'm originally from India, from Mumbai. And I came to the US around 15 years ago for my postgraduate studies in film. I have a bachelor's in applied art and communication studies, and then I studied cinematography and directing in Los Angeles. And then I've been working in the film industry since. It's been 15 years approximately, and I also teach at Santa Monica College, which is a community college here in California. I teach cinematography there once a week, and both Han and I freelance a lot on different projects, documentaries or videos of films. We freelance here in Los Angeles, and yeah, we enjoy what we do, and Caffeinated was one such example. It was an exciting journey we took together.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So in terms of Caffeinated, how long did it take you to make this film?
It was approximately 5 years. And because it was a passion project, we just, I mean, I think at a time we barely knew each other, but this project and this experience really like sort of sealed our brotherhood in a way. Yeah, it took 5 years. We did it in our like any free time we had, any money we had, just kind of bootstrapped and we made it happen. It was my first featured documentary. I just went in and just kind of, it was pretty ambitious for.
To add something, Vaishal?
Yeah, I mean, it took 4 to 5 years, as Han said, and you know, we were also freelancing on other projects, doing day jobs at the same time. So we had to kind of work in chunks, and this is slightly before equipment became so cheap and everybody started filming. Nowadays, everybody has a fancy camera on Zoom. So this is slightly before that movement. So it was still more tough, and documentaries were also, they've been there for a long time. But nowadays, an audience watches way more documentaries than they used to watch 8 years ago, you know. So it was at a time when things still needed a slightly larger push than they do today. And so we worked with that, and then we synchronized it also with some of the coffee seasons and harvest seasons. And then we went to those countries depending on, where we could maximize the filming opportunities at the right time.
So, Han mentioned that this was at the beginning of your friendship and brotherhood and so on. So, how did you come about making this movie about coffee? So, where was the idea? Were you in a coffee shop and saying, "Hey, oh, I wonder where this cup of coffee came from"? How did it come about?
My dad is a big coffee drinker. I mean, coffee and cigarettes is the only two things that he uh, consumes on a daily basis. And so I grew up with that, but I could never really drink coffee at the time. It was too strong. Even when I started the the idea of making this documentary, still I couldn't drink um, coffee. And so I think at some point I was just curious as to, why this sort of beverage, coffee brings a lot of people together. It bridges a lot of cultures, and every culture has a way of brewing coffee, this like sort of morning or night ritual. And so I was just fascinated with that, and it started a curiosity of where coffee came from. Um, and so the first thing I did was apply to be a barista, because I figured, if I'm gonna learn about coffee, I should be in coffee. And so I applied and worked for a few months at a local coffee shop here in Los Angeles. And from there, I really sort of fell in love with coffee. It was the first time I had coffee. It was nothing like I've like ever tasted before. It wasn't bitter. It tasted of fruit, blueberries to be exact, and there was just so much nuances within coffee that like you just wouldn't know from drinking coffee every day, right? And so that's how it started, and from there I just kind of fell deeper and deeper into figuring out what coffee is all about, where it came from, the processes, and along the way, those are like from the movie, we sort of learned as we go, and it was just a beautiful experience for me personally.
Wonderful. And how did you meet Vaishal and said, "Hey, let's make this documentary"? Or Vaishal, how did you meet Han and he said, "Let's go do the documentary"? Who met who or to actually engage them?
Well, it was very organic in that sense. What had happened was she showed me some things she was shooting, uh, and I saw it, and then she said I may make a documentary short about it, like a shorter version or something like that, because she was still playing with the idea of how to make it, and in the fun of it. And that's when I was like, okay, like maybe we can team up and do something bigger on a larger scale and do a feature. I had worked on other features as a cinematographer before, over the years, and it had enough scope to, think of it on a larger scale. So it just happened where she was already doing it as her idea, and then I was like, okay, let's make it more of a bigger project, and that's when we decided that this could be something like 80 minutes or 90 minutes into a bigger movie.
Lovely. So you said it took you 4 to 5 years to make this documentary. What were the greatest challenges that you faced when making this film?
I think to tackle such a big project and such a broad topic, we just went in with kind of like the approach of let's cover everything, but in doing that, we learned so much, but we also have so much material and so many interviews that it was overwhelming to try and craft a story with what we learned and with what we filmed. And so the biggest challenge for me was to like figure out what story we want to tell, because there are so many great stories, but you know we can only fit into an 80-minute film.
Mhm.
And so the biggest challenge was trying to find which moments, which story to highlight, yeah, and to make a cohesive story that can engage the audience.
Beautiful. Bashad, would you like to add?
Well, I mean, so on the creative side, Han just explained what we were going through, and we had over 130 interviews. So a part of it is also that we both were relatively younger, correct, age-wise, and um, documentary as a form was also something new to us back then. And now we worked so much more in other projects with different films. So whenever you're jumping into a new medium, it needs time to, get introduced to it uh, and how it talks to you as an artist. And apart from that, of course, the other challenges are obviously, I mean, in retrospect, 4 years is an average time for a documentary, or even in fact on time. It's not a very long time. But back then, financially, it was taking a toll on us to these trips abroad and this and that. But at the same time, we were confident that we were getting really good footage, which kept us going. And we were also confident that we had the right people within the coffee industry on our side. So it's like whatever our challenges were, they were really mitigated by, having the right people on board, because they brought with them a certain brain trust, which could allow us to navigate those challenges more easily.
Mm. So you talked about the financial constraints as an two independent filmmakers doing this in parallel to other of work. How did you said you bootstrapped it? What were the challenges in reaching out to foundations and so on to actually get some grants as independent filmmakers to be able to complement your own investment into this film?
And you want me to go for this one?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so I think in terms of producing, what happens is many times when foundations start seeing bigger corporate names involved, they already start thinking that this is a marketing gag or something like that. Um, and and for the most part, that thought process is justified, because many times that happens. But at the same time, we were very conscious that we did not want to promise into the final cut any specific entity that we are interviewing or filming with. There was no guarantee you'll be in the movie. We were very clear about that, which meant that we did not want to take any favors from anybody who's in the film. Second thing is, so we did not really apply for foundation funding, because foundation funding sees things in a very different light. And when you talk about food documentaries, unless it's heavily focused on a specific social issue which they can see clearly way in advance of what the filmmakers are actually going to shoot, then only they will fund it. And then that restricts you to follow that story, somewhat. Because in a way, your written application is going to say we are going to do so, and then this is how the project will look. But then we were following our curiosity into the journey of coffee, and we were hoping that the viewer will also be on that journey together with us. Like, hey, how does this happen? How does that happen? Like, so, which means that we did not want to promise anybody that this is how the project is going to look, because we ourselves did not know. Okay, and we wanted to leave it like that because it was more of a organic sculpting process of let's see how this shapes up as a story. So what we did was we used a lot of our personal funding from our day jobs and other film jobs. And whenever we set a target that, okay, 3 months from now, we are going to Nicaragua or Honduras or whatever, and we would start saving up. And then we did have a producer who took care of all the airfare. Mm-hmm. He's also a travel agent. Mm-hmm. So that took care of all our flights. And then when we went to those countries, we stayed with the farmers, because you're not going to climb down 5,000 feet just to sleep overnight. It's just so much. And it also brings in a certain intimacy in the way they interacted with us the next day, because we were their guests also. We went on the farm together at 5 o'clock in the morning to get the sunrise. So it was all a family in the end. And there are some journalistic rules which ask you to don't do this and don't do that. But I think it was important for us to bring that intimacy of what that world looks like. What does the life of a farmer look like? For example, in Nicaragua, there was no electricity where we were. I mean, it was the first time we had to think like, okay, how many batteries do we have? Or are we going to finish this interview on time before this battery drains off? So coming back to funding, it was her money, my money. I had a couple of producer friends who put in some money. And then what we did was, once we were midway, we showed a work sample to some other people who wanted to donate to the project. Because by then the suspense was gone. Like, how is this project going to look? So we would do these in-house meetings where we show people a movie, get their feedback, and then somebody will say, okay, maybe my company or my friend or whatever can donate something, And some of the donations came in kind, right? Somebody will say, like, I used to work in a restaurant, and one of the largest color laboratories, they used to dine there. And he had told me, when you finish the film, let me know. I'll help you out. And it's the largest post-production facility in the country, in the US, and one of the largest in the world. And once we finished, I got back to him. I said that I've stopped working at the restaurant, but here is the film. We need your services. And he helped us out. So it was a lot of favors, friends, donors, and we ourselves, and a lot of faith from our parents and family that I guess whatever they are doing, one day it will get completed and people may like it.
Lovely. Han, would you like to add?
Well, I mean, like, I see Caffeinated as sort of our love letter to coffee, and I hope it showed, it really showed through, because like Vishal said, like we traveled with, Jeff Watts, who's the green buyer of Intelligentsia, to Guatemala. We stayed at the farmers, with the farmers and their family, and so that, like, that kind of experience, and just like deep diving into not only coffee, but how the farmers live their, coffee is their way of life.
What we've seen in the past 10 years and we're seeing right now is the rediscovery of coffee as a culinary experience. The real true coffee houses have rediscovered that sense of specialness.
Coffee uniformly comes, it seems, from truly beautiful places.
Once we start to look, we peel back the curtain, we see that there are a lot of people behind the coffee who depend on its production for their livelihoods. The farmers trust us to really deliver on the promise of that coffee.
It's like I'm giving my final touch in a painting.
To think that a tiny bean can humble an individual.
I appreciate the fact that you talked about that you wanted to have full editorial control and making sure that to, in the process, integrate others that are able to help you make this film a reality. So let's talk about the coffee industry. What is the most striking thing that you've learned from this experience making this film, but in the coffee industry?
I think, I mean, it's been a while now, and I'm sure the industry has changed a lot. But from like when we were making Caffeinated, the most striking thing to me was how many hands goes into making our cup of coffee. You know, we talk about that whole process from bean to cup, but at the time it was a revelation for me in terms of like, wow, you know, just this simple coffee, this cup of coffee that people drink every morning, and I see my dad drinking every morning, but not knowing like the story, the history, the labor that goes behind it. That was really like eye-opening to me, and it from that experience it kind of changed the way I look at food, the way I look at, you know, crafts, the way I look at everything.
At the time at which we filmed it, this is like 2012, 2011, somewhere around there. You know, things were really new. We both live in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is kind of behind Seattle and Portland, and all those. At least back then, it was new in its coffee scene, and it was just emerging. So we were able to kind of see things more objectively because everything was coming at us in a fresh way, right? Mm-hmm. And we were traveling to those cities also, shooting, and then coming back to our own city. And we were able to see it as a third party, right? What struck me the most was overall the excitement of, you know, this is a very, it's like American entrepreneurship meets a beverage, mm-hmm. and meets a community which will want that beverage. So I think it was just this intersection of, yes, let's open a coffee shop. I think this is a cool idea. And this coffee tastes great. I'm going to get that one. I like this Brazilian one. So it was just this entire flux of energy, and where you felt that you were in the middle of something interesting, very interesting, because what I do like about America is the infinite possibilities. If American customers like something, then it's a promise to a business. I mean, we are a very consuming country, which most of the world either likes us or hates us for. Mm-hmm. But as a business owner and as a coffee industry, you just know that, okay, there is a certain promise in this. If I get it in the right neighborhood, do it the right way, and if luck supports me, and if the people support me, this will take off. So I think that excitement to me is something which is very, very fascinating. You don't see it a lot in other countries. They are more conservative in their approach. And you don't even see it as much in other industries. as much as, and now you could blame it on the caffeine. But at the same time, there is this, I've got very close myself to be like, oh, it would be great to own a coffee shop one day. So that's how close we are. So that idea of, coffee itself and the excitement it brings around us is something fascinating.
So in terms of, because you said earlier on, Vishal, that you had an opportunity to be with the coffee farmers and really experience firsthand what they go through. Can you give us a glimpse of what is the journey?
And when I was with Han in Nicaragua, we went to Nicaragua twice. And I've always grown up in a city. I've been a city guy in Mumbai and Los Angeles, very urban neighborhoods. And the farmers made something out of chicken. And I ate it, and it was delicious. And then we went for a walk outside, and I saw a cage of chicken. And she said, "So you like that, huh? You found it delicious, huh?" In Spanish, she told me. And I'm like, yes. And it just struck me that this chicken did not come from a grocery store. Like, this chicken we ate was just right here, right? And so it's a different way of existing with nature, which we were exposed to. That was one example. The second example, when we were in Guatemala, I thought I'll wear old shoes, they will get dirty, so it's fine, I can throw them away after the trip. And then I go and I start slipping on the mountains. And we are at 5,000 feet, and I look down and I'm like, oh my God, I froze for a second because I couldn't move forward or backward. And it just showed us what life was for them on a daily basis, So those were some of those introductions that, okay, welcome to life outside of your own city, and this is how the world works. And I've seen and been exposed to that in India also to a degree. But I think that part, and not to disregard, I think the most important aspect of it all was how large-hearted all the farmers were. Everybody, we went to at least 4 or 5 farmers' homes, and they were so generous with everything they had. They were so warm. And even with the most minimal of resources, some of them were, we would go and pull out hibiscus, brew fresh hibiscus tea, or they will show us how a cacao plant is opened up. And, so I think that, and the fourth part, I think, which is extremely important, is their discipline to their work ethic. And there is a certain reverence to work and to nature in how you live. You recycle everything. Everything just has a natural flow of moving around. You grow things, you put the fertilizer, you get lunch at a certain time. That discipline and the work ethic. And there were just too many things we could learn from them, because life moves at a different pace there. And it forces you to be very attuned to how nature works, because you're on a farm, you're not in an office in a cubicle. So for me, those were some of the things that struck out: their work ethic, their warmth, and their closeness and proximity to nature.
Yeah, and I mean, in the film, we showed the process as a montage, but when we were there, I mean, each bag of green coffee weighs a ton, and they had to, put it on their back, climb up, 1,000-2,000 feet, or climb down, and it's just up and down like that, and and they pick their coffees by hand, and these coffees it has to be grown at certain elevation, and so going through those hills, and it's a very dangerous job as well. And so to just witness that is it makes you think, like it makes me think of how I'm consuming things and how I'm living my life. And, it's just, we live in access, and so to be there and to witness, the lack of electricity or the lack of certain equipment to make their life easier. But what they had in abundance was just a joy and a pride, a sense of pride for their work. And so that was really, it was very touching to witness that and to, take away some of that and bring it back to my personal life as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know you interviewed the baristas as well, and I know you had tried to be a barista as well, or have been a barista. So give us a glimpse of why the baristas, why the end. You went from the farmer, and now you also showed the end result. Can you just share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's because there's so much care and work that goes into growing coffee and roasting. The last step is the barista presenting the coffee to you, right? And so, I mean, baristas get a lot of bad rep for, it's just they care. They care about the coffee, and they care about how, about presenting that coffee of the day to you in the best way. And I was barely a barista. I was trying to learn just how to make coffee with with going in the morning, dialing in the coffee, knowing what the coffee changes throughout the day and throughout the week, and so dialing it in, trying to find the best technique or the best way to present that coffee to the customer that day. I can I took a lot of pride in that, and I know a lot of the baristas do too. And it's just that, that final step where you want to honor the process that's been, that what it took to get here. So that final step to the consumer has to be with the utmost respect.
And Vaishal?
No, I think so. Baristas are the final gateway, correct? So it's like if you get a suit, you want your tailor to be really good, because the cotton farmer or the wool, all those things, in the end, the tailor will go through the tailor, and you want it to fit right. So it's the same way the baristas were. They could either enhance things or ruin things, and they were a very crucial part. It's like the finish line, to your cup of coffee. So we focused on them as well for that reason.
You mentioned it as well earlier on in terms of people are opening coffee shop, the entrepreneurship of coffee business, and so on and so forth. But and you've interviewed some of the baristas as well, right? What have you learned about the baristas you've interviewed, and what have you also learned in terms of the coffee shop industry?
Is that for me, the question?
For both of you.
Well, I think, so let me give you one example. This is something that happened today. So many times, if you don't live with a family, like my roommates were asleep, and I went to the coffee shop this morning, and there was a new employee. She took down my order as a double espresso instead of a macchiato, and the barista knows me, and they're like, "Why is he getting double espresso today instead of with some milk?" So when I saw, and she was a new employee on the cashier, so when I saw there's no milk in it. I needed some milk. So she's like, we both had this thing where, wait, did you order this? And I'm like, is this my order? And then we realized there was a mistake by the new employee. She's like, don't worry, I'll just make you a new one because this won't taste good if I just use the old espresso. And I knew I had to come to this call. At the same time, I was very happy about her care to do it right, right? And they had a big line, she still did it. And it goes to say that sometimes baristas are the first people you're going to meet in the morning. And at least for me, a lot depends on my first couple of interactions in the day. I mean, I have a pretty wide latitude for social acceptance, but at the same time, it's always good to get a good start to your day. And I think baristas can play a very crucial role in that. So that kind of focuses on the social aspect. Uh, Another thing is, if you are asking the question in a larger way as to what was one thing you saw in common, I think at heart, a lot of them were social people. You know, they liked, if they had the opportunity, they would strike a good conversation with people, and it kind of, it's that glue which coffee also has as a social lubricant. And when baristas have it, it kind of just brings everything together. So that was something I felt which was common, where that social aspect in general was something common. And then excitement about coffee. You know, uh, most of them are really excited about what they do, and they do it in a very dignified way. So that was something else which we saw as a recurring pattern, because we interviewed some of the best coffee shops. So just to get hired and to stay employed by the owners of these coffee shops means you at least made it that far, correct? So you must be doing most things right. And that's where we found this curiosity about coffee and excitement, and then the social aspect. Uh, those three were something we saw as a recurring theme within baristas.
Hunt, would you like to add to that?
I agree with Vishal. It's I think I didn't. It was surprising to see how genuinely like excited the baristas are about coffee, and that feeling and that excitement, it is infectious. And so wherever we went, it was just like that, instant welcoming of with us into their coffee shops, or and like preparing what they thought was the best you know coffee method for that coffee that was brought in.
This is something that, in terms of Starbucks, the big corporations and so on, what, if you, even from your personal experience and especially making this documentary, what is the clear distinction that you saw between a brand such as the Starbucks industry coffee versus the smaller, artisanal type of coffee shops?
Smaller coffee shops obviously have more intimacy, right? You're not going to have the same lines. Generally, there were a couple of coffee shops like Vivace in Seattle, crazy lines. Intelligentsia in Los Angeles, and again, a very busy coffee shop. So in terms of a coffee shop structure, there is a certain calm. You feel you are in a smaller place, something more intimate. Customers are here to stay, and the pacing is different. and the coffee, I won't, there was just more experimentation going on within the coffee because they were not duty bound to maintain consistency over a larger franchisee model. They had to only think for one store or three stores at the most. They did not have to think, how is my coffee going to taste in Los Angeles and New York at the same time, correct?
Mm.
So that obviously, it's almost the same as having things from a chef who runs his own restaurant or her own restaurant, as opposed to going to a larger corporate or franchisee model where you have a menu which you can get anywhere in those franchisee models. Now, that being said, with all due respect to Starbucks, there were certain things which I had read the book of Howard Schultz back then. And till date, we cannot, whereas there are some parts where people feel like, okay, sometimes the tables may take longer to clean or whatever. But somehow they have been able to create a business which has stood the test of time and is thriving. So for me, it's just looking at two different things with two different points, and both have their advantages and disadvantages. And both are interesting in different ways. What you get to learn from one thing, you don't get to learn from another. So I am fascinated by the independent coffee shops, but then there are parts and attributes I also like of chains where I don't want suspense. If I'm in a new neighborhood, let's say shooting, filming somewhere in the middle of Philadelphia, I'd rather know what to expect from that coffee shop, right? If I'm going to be there only for a day or two, because that coffee for that day is very important to me. So, yeah, I think, but for me, personally, I just like the idea of, oh, this is my neighborhood coffee shop, or I like the idea of small business, because that's also another way of looking at entrepreneurship. We have a bend to look at entrepreneurship as a Fortune 500 company, or you have to be publicly listed. But I think true entrepreneurship is also to give everybody an opportunity to really initiate a business and thrive within their local community as well.
Wonderful. Han, would you like to add?
I think for me, just as a consumer, I love both small shops and Starbucks. I think it's whatever is available to me at the time at that location. For me, I will always choose local coffee shops first, but there are times where I'm on I-5 driving and Starbucks is it's everywhere and it's consistent and it's you just know what you're getting, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's no suspense in that. If I want just a regular latte, knowing exactly what I want, there's Starbucks. There's always Starbucks. Mm-hmm. But I get excited when there's a new cafe that pops up or new coffees, to try out. Then I seek those smaller local shops to go and explore.
Mm. Lovely, because why I ask you that question as a coffee drinker, for quite some times for the experience of coffee coming from Ethiopia, as we were talking earlier on, which historically originates from Ethiopia, the coffee bean and the coffee experience and the roasting and so on and so forth. And every coffee shop especially the artisanal coffee shops, have their own way of roasting, and then their own way of actually the barista, you know, how they make the coffee. So that experience, the coffee is an experience. And so that's why I wanted to know a little bit about your perspective, given the documentary you've made, especially from a bean perspective, right? Because most of the larger corporation have a different way of roasting in order to keep the consistency. So as we're wrapping up in a way, so what are the projects are you working on right now?
But I think I wanted to, since we have this moment and you spoke about the bean and the coffee shops and Starbucks, I think this has been something which is worrying me a little bit from my recent experiences at let's say large scale coffee shops or coffee chains, is you know, it's getting hard and harder to associate them with what a coffee shop should be. And I'm all about having a variety of drinks. I've enjoyed drinks in the summer, which are slightly different. But what is happening, a trend I'm seeing recently, and I don't know if they are realizing it, many times you may have customers who have ordered, let's say, a cappuccino, and somebody may have ordered a cold drink which has one or two syrups. You need to use ice and run it through the blender, and you may have to add some fruit and some milk and this and that, a larger recipe with more steps in it. And where I think we may lose focus is if somebody is going to press an espresso button, let the espresso fall, and then go and deal with that drink. And then that drink may delay them to come back to get your milk. Or if I've ordered only 2 shots of espresso, which has happened to me before, by the time I get it, the temperature has completely changed because somebody thought, oh, it'll be only 15 seconds more or 20 seconds more till they finish the other drink. And I think this is something that we have to be more cautious about as to what are we really as a business, you know what I mean? Because if you start losing customers who came there for coffee, right? Because now you've added a huge menu of drinks you want to offer, and your baristas are overwhelmed, no matter how well you have condensed the recipe to shorten the preparation cycle. You are still risking a lot people who are actually there for a genuinely well-made cup of coffee, because then it's being compromised by adding a lot of burden on the barista to do miscellaneous things. And now they have this app where if you order it on the app, your drink is already ready. And you will see it when you are the only person in line, but then there are 3 other coffees being made because somebody has placed the order on the app. And that gets priority for whatever reason. And it kind of, repels you from the coffee shop experience, right? Because you're just there standing for 10 minutes and these drinks which don't look like coffee to the eye are being made. And then you're waiting. And many times the coffee shop doesn't even smell like a coffee shop. So those are just some things I feel whoever's listening to this, I'm hoping that as a customer, you'll think it more from the customer point of view as to how things are shifting, into a juice/milkshake environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Café y más café.
one of the most important things is the love for this land.
Every time I make coffee, I feel at peace.
This is like going to your grandma's house, full of love.
They say that coffee gets in your blood, and once you're in coffee, you can't leave. It's just that inspiring.
I concur with you. I think the smaller coffee shops have a more genuine, authentic experience for coffee. Right. So yes, definitely. And thank you for making that point. So going back to that question of where do you go from here? And I know it's been you made the movie in 2015. Can you give us a little bit of what projects have you been working on, and what projects are you working on, especially post-COVID, and so on?
I've been working on a few different things, but the documentary that I'm working on now is about a Hungarian cellist and composer who perished during World War II, and that project has been ongoing for 4 years. So hopefully it will come out right on time this year.
Excellent. And why a Hungarian cellist, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was filming. I came upon his music filming a case study on this musician, Paul Hellman, and I sort of fell in love with his music. There was something about his music that was familiar to me, and it brought up a lot of memories of my two uncles who had passed away, who was also musicians. And so I just thought, if this music could move me this much, there must be a great story behind it. And so going in blindly again, I just kind of reach out to this musician's family to make a short documentary. It's turning into a feature 4 years later, because there's just so much to explore and so much to uncover, and this effort to revive and recover his music is just something I'm passionate about. And so yeah, so that's something that I've been working on. I'm also I've been itching to make another coffee film, but I just don't know what it's going to be about yet. So that's hopefully that's in the near horizon.
Tell them about recovered voices also.
Yes, yeah. So this part of the documentary is from a program called Recovered Voices at the Colburn School here in Los Angeles, and their effort is to highlight and play music by composers who were suppressed and died during World War II because they were Jews. Mm. And so that's where I started. That's where I started exploring Paul Herman's work. But there's a wide sort of list of music and composers during that time that the public don't know about and never heard of, but given better circumstances, their names and their music would have been in our history now, as one of the greats, right?
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, so for me, I've been working on a couple of criminal justice films related to women's prisons in California. One is an investigative one. The second one is more like a memoir almost, but animated for a woman who served a life sentence. So, but it also looks, one of them looks at it as a lens through of mass incarceration and race and, the exploitation and the war on drugs. The second one is more about institutional negligence and indifference towards inmates. And so those are two things which are again on the slow, larger in production horizon. And then I do cinematography for, I teach, as I said, so we do 2 films per year at the college. We shoot them, those are fiction films. So we've had the last 2 years, both our films at the Cannes Film Festival. One of them was about the Armenian genocide based on a true story. And the second one, which we have playing at Cannes in July, actually, it's called Broken Layers. It's about a half Syrian and half Mexican army veteran who comes back from war and tries to find her identity in the US. So those are 2 films, and then I'm producing like one which is called Dog Walk Home. If you Google Dog Walk Home film, it will show up. That again has to do with the relationship of service dogs and their value in curing post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans. So those are some of the projects that we're working.
So let me ask you one final question. I would say is why documentaries?
I think they are the easiest and most friendly way to engage an audience, inform them, educate them, and to create a debate. If you look at the current generation, as I said, I teach in a college, I cannot expect them to read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I cannot expect them to read Chekhov, because those books were written in a different time, in a different society, right? In a different era altogether. And these people don't find any connecting points. So documentaries are something which are so contemporary and immediate as a medium. And a lot of tools which were only accessible to high-end storytelling in fiction and narrative filmmaking is now available to documentaries. Let's say illustrations, animations, more cheaper cameras, even a lot of manpower, which work in fiction is now available. Basically, a documentary in today's time can shape itself in a way where you can almost customize really efficiently how to design the information as a story, and you can find very strong, coherent ways in which it can transmit that information to an audience. And that to me, if you want to create an impact or social change, it's the most powerful tool we have right now. I mean, if you look at the last 5 years, look what podcasts have done. There is a podcast about everything, and it can inform you. You can be doing dishes, or you can be taking a walk. You can listen half an hour every day, right? Very powerful tool. So documentaries is the same. You have audio, you have visual, and also the current generation is receptive of that as a medium. They don't really differentiate. Like our film released in the same cinemas where they would have played Batman or any other film, and people showed up to full houses, right? A decade ago, that wouldn't happen easily. So we are in the right time where it's the most powerful tool to disseminate information and create social change. So, I mean, that's why we chose documentaries.
I'm inspired by stories that, that are, would otherwise not have been known, at all. So I'm curious to find these topics and stories that are aren't in the regular media, that aren't, that are just regular, everyday people going about their life, but it's extraordinary in its own way, and that's where I chose documentary because of that, because I want to highlight these, stories and people that are just going about their regular lives.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you. It's always good to know who is telling the story, what is the perspective and what's the journey of making a movie, a film, a documentary. And so thank you, Han. Thank you, Vaishal. I look forward to learning more about your future and upcoming projects. Keep me posted, and I'll definitely share with you once we have it online. I'll make sure to send you the link. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Do follow us, subscribe to our